It is the end of the season, or the Premier League season anyway. We've still got European games to do. We've got the Conference League final this week. We've got the Champions League final. We've got the Nations League. We've got the Club World Cup. And I've got James Olley with me because Rob has taken a week off at the end of a mad season. So you must be looking forward to the end of the season, James.
I can't even see the end of the season. There's still about 6 weeks left. I don't know where Rob's gone. Rob's going to America with me to the Club World Cup. He's being lazy. This is ridiculous. The season doesn't end. Nothing. Football never ends. It officially goes on forever.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the Man City players talk at the end of their season with a haunted look on their face, knowing that their season might not end until the middle of July in the US. So, but yeah, it's been a long slog, as you say, from the Euros last summer right through to where we are now. But we've got a final this week, a big final for a Premier League club. It's Chelsea in the Conference League final. I know you're going to Wroclaw on Wednesday, James. So obviously, Chelsea have made it into the Champions League, finished fourth in the Premier League. Big success for Enzo Maresca. So in many ways, this Conference League final feels like it doesn't really matter now, but does it matter?
Well, I mean, it matters from the point of view that Chelsea are a club that under Roman Abramovich was used to winning trophies. You know, the managers would come and go, the players would come and go, but one thing stayed consistent, and that is that they would win almost every year. They ended with a trophy. So, you know, and this would be the first trophy of the Bowley Clear Lake era, and it would be a significant milestone for them in that regard to bring what, you know, would be calm to the chaos, really. And I think I think the Champions League qualification is a huge thing for Maresca, actually, because, you know, the club sort of privately circulated, and we ran a source's story on this, that, you know, Maresca would stay in post no matter what happened in terms of Champions League qualification. We ran that earlier this month, and, you know, they were trying to get out ahead of any potential sort of ramifications of missing out and, you know, and finishing the Premier League season badly. But it's all sort of well and good to kind of get that out there. But had they missed out on the Champions League and then they'd lost this final on Wednesday, there would have been serious questions asked about Maresca, and, you know, among a fan base that is already pretty disgruntled. But getting that top five finish has really sort of made it a much smoother week this week, and really they can just go and attack this final. And if they win it, great. If they don't, it's disappointing, but it's hardly the end of the world.
I mean, I think we've both been of the opinion that, you know, Tottenham won a trophy last week, and a trophy's a trophy. It's important to win a trophy. We've both said that, and I think we've both said that Arsenal need to win a trophy, so we can't be dismissive of a tournament. It is a European trophy, and they don't come along very often. And I think Chelsea got this, well, it'd be the unique distinction of being the only club to win every single trophy they could play for. I think they're the only club that will able to do that. I don't think they want to be in the Conference League again, but if they win the Conference League, they'll have had a clean sweep of all the trophies. So that's something they can be proud of, I guess, if they do it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot was made of that when they won the Club World Cup, actually, because that was just before the whole Roman Abramovich ownership ended, or the club went into government ownership. You know, they'd won the lot, and then obviously UEFA created this UEFA Conference League, and suddenly they've got one more hurdle to jump. But I mean, this competition really has felt a bit sort of lose-lose, really, for Chelsea all the way through, in that they're quite obviously been the best team, you know, that's the strongest team in the competition with the best European pedigree, the biggest resources by far. You know, they've been playing, with all respect to a lot of these teams, they've been really playing European minnows all the way through. Now they've got a proper team in the final in Betis. But the sort of expectation is still that they win it. So even if they win it, I don't think it's going to be, you know, a huge sort of fanfare. But I just think it's really important for Maresca, because, you know, he has faced a lot of criticism this season, and it did feel as though, a bit like in the title winning team with Leicester in the Championship that he guided back to the Premier League, there was a really big wobble midway through that season. Leicester came out the other side of it, and Chelsea have sort of done the same, really. I mean, it's been pretty unconvincing. They weren't great at Forest. I was there at the City Ground at the weekend, and, you know, it was more functional than anything else. It was a bit old school Chelsea, really, and that they kind of sort of, you know, defensively they were very resilient. They dug in. They didn't really commit too much risk in the game, particularly after they went ahead, and they got themselves over the line. They found a way to win, and that sort of, that ironclad spirit, that winning mentality has sort of been lost in the takeover and the sort of turmoil of the last 2 or 3 years. So if they can sort of get themselves over the line in the Champions League and deliver a trophy, it really gives Maresca a solid platform to go and attack Club World Cup, and then obviously the next season coming up.
Do we know what it's worth to win the Conference League? I mean, we know what it's worth to win the Champions League, and we know what it'll be worth to win the Club World Cup. Obviously, Chelsea are in that, so they'll do well out of that. And I don't think winning or losing the Conference League final will have a massive impact on their finances. But is it worth winning financially?
Well, I mean, it's negligible. I don't know the exact figure. I don't have it to hand, but I mean, from that point of view, it's 97 million quid to win the Club World Cup. And I know that Chelsea are going to take that competition particularly seriously. We all know that they had to get quite creative with their PSR and FFP compliance. They sold a hotel, which I think is still actually being investigated by UEFA. They also sold their women's team. There's only so many sort of accounting loopholes you can jump through before you actually start to run out of road. And, any prize money on that score will be welcome. I think there might be one or two departures this summer. I don't think they're under pressure to sell. I mean, it was a big thing made last year, the June 30th deadline, that they had to get a few out of the door. Obviously, Conor Gallagher left, there were one or two others, and then they had the bomb squad right at the end of the summer when they were desperately trying to get players out. They'll look to get players like Raheem Sterling off the books, Carney Chukwuemeka, Ben Chilwell, Armando Broja, Trevor Chalobah. There's quite a few who've been out on loan who you think will be moved on. And if they can generate the money there, then that will ease compliance. But I mean, the prize money really is all about the Club World Cup in terms of that. I think it's a minimum 40 million they're going to get for that. And as I say, it could be 97 if they win it. So that would have a huge impact for Chelsea.
So do we expect any deals to be done before they go to the Club World Cup? Because obviously we know that the window opens on the 1st of June and they've been linked with Liam Delap. I mean, some clubs are trying to get players in before the Club World Cup. Is that something Chelsea will do you think?
Well, they're fairly relaxed about this. I was speaking to someone about this yesterday at Chelsea, actually, and there is a view that what this window is doing is actually rushing teams into doing their summer business as opposed to trying to do it diligently and properly like everyone else. So it is a sort of artificial window in the sense that, okay, there's an urgency for those clubs who are going to the Club World Cup, but for everybody else, there isn't that. A lot of them go on holiday. A lot of them don't necessarily want to do the business, day one when the window opens. They maybe would want to have a holiday for a couple of weeks, let the recruitment teams do their work, negotiate, and then obviously have those players in ideally for the start of pre-season. So it is possible, and we know that in the case of Delap, obviously, it would be a fairly straightforward deal to do in terms of there's a release clause. We know the fixed price. There's no negotiating there. It's a case of convincing the player to come. So that one is a possibility. And clearly they need more firepower. I mean, their number one target this summer is to bring in a forward. Maresca's defended Nicholas Jackson a lot this season. And I do think he gets a bit of an unfair press sometimes. I do think he's better than a lot of people think. However, is he going to win you the league? Probably not. And they certainly need more competition in that area.
So, as listeners and viewers will know, every week we can't avoid going down the Manchester United rabbit hole. It always seems to drag us in. And on this occasion, the Europa Conference League final, a Manchester United rabbit hole opens up. We've got Jadon Sancho on the Chelsea side. We've got Antony on the Real Betis side. Now, two players on loan from Man United with uncertain futures. One, two, or neither may end up going back to Old Trafford. But it's just interesting that I've got a list of 11 players who've left United in recent years who've gone on to good things, certainly this season. And these are two that, Sancho hasn't had the greatest time at Chelsea, but he could end the season winning a trophy. Antony's had a great time at Betis. I mean, it's a strange scenario whereby there's so many players. Scott McTominay has got 12 goals in 34 games in Serie A, helped Napoli win the Serie A title. Romelu Lukaku's had a great season there. Dean Henderson helped Crystal Palace win the FA Cup. I mean, there's a long list of even Tyrell Malacia has won the Dutch League with PSV Eindhoven this season. So, obviously, Sancho is a different scenario to some, but what do you see happening with Sancho? Do you think, has he actually benefited from being away from United? Has he done better at Chelsea than we've actually given him credit for?
Well, it's funny, that list of players that you mentioned, who've done better, I'm not sure whether Sancho joins that list. Mm-hmm. He's been intermittent.
He's in the Rashford camp, isn't he? He's in the Marcus Rashford camp. He's kind of done okay, but not pulled up any trees.
Yeah, 3 goals, 4 assists in 31 games. It's not exactly tearing up trees. I think it's sort of significant that, when they negotiated the deal, Chelsea to sign him, that obviously we all knew straight away about the obligation to buy, the fixed fee around 25 million. But it only came out a couple of months ago that, actually, they've also got a penalty fee release that they don't have to pay that, and they just pay 5 million to send him back to Old Trafford. I think the fact that came out when it came out, I think probably tells you that there are certain doubts about Sancho. I mean, I was told at the time that was a data-led move, that Chelsea obviously have pursued this policy of looking at young players across Europe and trying to sign players they identify as having great potential and giving them long contracts and that stability to then develop at Stamford Bridge. They felt Sancho fell into that category. I'm not sure the data would still suggest that, although they obviously have a lot more metrics than we do to analyse these players. So I think that one is a 50-50 call, really. I think it might also depend on what else they can do in the market. I think if they can identify a player like Nico Williams at Athletic Bilbao, who was obviously attracting a lot of interest from Arsenal and one or two other clubs, Real Madrid potentially as well. If they can get him, then I think they'd probably send Sancho back. But if it looks as though they're not going to be able to get other targets, then they may just stick with Sancho and back themselves to basically improve a young player.
I mean, from the Betis point of view, I mean, Antony has got 9 goals in 25 games for Betis, and he's got 5 assists. He's had a fantastic time on loan there. They've got Isco as well, who's obviously a player that's had a great career at Real Madrid, has won plenty of titles. Manuel Pellegrini is a coach that we're both familiar with. He's won a Premier League title with Man City, had a time at West Ham. So is this the toughest game that Chelsea could have had in the Conference League, considering, like you said earlier, that it's been a tournament of minnows?
It will be a significant step up for Chelsea from anything that they've really faced so far. And, you could argue that you probably want your toughest game in the final because the motivation will be there anyway. The players will obviously be targeted. Everything will be peaking towards that. But, I just think the Champions League qualification has taken the edge off it, because there's been such pressure on Chelsea to just expected to win this competition all the way through now. And if they'd fallen short and they were out of the Champions League, then, it would be a failure. The season would be a failure. Whereas now it really is a success, I think, no matter what happens on Wednesday night. And they can attack it with a slightly different mentality. But, Antony's have you seen much of Antony out there? I mean, is he still doing that ridiculous sort of turn on the ball that, is not really a skill, but he thinks is a skill?
I saw a bit of the second leg against Fiorentina, and he did play well in parts, but he was the Antony of Manchester United in parts as well. He's very unpredictable, but not in a good way. But I think he's found a bit of a home in Spain. He's found that the league is not as physical. And I think that's one thing that a lot of players who struggle, not just at United, but in the Premier League, they can find a home in Germany or in Spain where it's less physically demanding on them. There's not as many games to worry about. And I think Antony's thrived. I think the big issue from United's perspective is that I think in terms of amortisation, they're still looking to get around £30 million transfer fee to kind of cancel what they owe on the books. And as well as he's done at Betis, I don't see anybody paying £30 million for Antony. I don't think Betis can afford it. The hope from United's perspective is that because he's done so well at Betis, he might attract one of the biggest Spanish clubs to maybe make a move for him and potentially come close to that £30 million area. His wages aren't too big. I've been told he's only on around a £70,000 a week basic at United, so that isn't going to be too punishing for a club to sign him. But look, the good thing is that at least United have found a club that he's thrived at, and it means that they can actually look to bring some money for him. Sancho is different. I agree. I think Sancho's been average at best.
mean, you mentioned that. Obviously, there's a list of players there that have improved or have certainly increased their performance level since they've left Old Trafford. If I ask you the $1 million question, do you have an answer to it? Which is, what is going on? Why is it that we've talked an awful lot about Manchester United and the issues there, but why is it that individual players who had kind of plateaued, and I'm thinking of Scott McTominay probably most obviously, at Old Trafford, have suddenly been reinvigorated and have found new dimensions to their game when they leave? What is it about Old Trafford that seems to do this to players?
Well, there's 2 more names I'm going to add to that list. Anthony Elanga helped Forest qualify for Europe this season, 6 goals and 11 assists. That's a great return, because if you compare his output to the Man United players this season, Mason Greenwood, difficult circumstances obviously with United, but 21 goals in 34 Ligue 1 games for Marseille helped them qualify for the Champions League. He's a top scorer in Ligue 1. Now, what happens? I think there's an air of defeatism at United, I think. And I think it's a crushing pressure that's on so many players. And I think the younger players that have struggled at United, I think Alejandro Garnacho is potentially the next one that this will happen to. He'll leave United and thrive somewhere else because United don't have the dressing room of experienced players that are there to bring them on. Rasmus Højlund maybe another one. I think, in the past they've had players, let's look at Cristiano Ronaldo and Wayne Rooney. I think Rooney was maybe an exception, but Ronaldo, when he started at United, he was inconsistent to the point of being Garnacho inconsistent. But look at the players he had around him. Rio Ferdinand, Nemanja Vidic, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Ruud van Nistelrooy, players that would take that pressure off. When I look at Garnacho and Højlund, they've been thrown at the deep end and they've struggled to survive, but there's nobody there to help them. And I think that's why it's so difficult for them at United. And when they leave United, it's a release. McTominay's gone to Napoli and he's in a dressing room with players that most of them have already won Serie A with Napoli about 2 or 3 years ago. They're a top team. They've got a top coach in Antonio Conte. I just think there's too much asked of the young players at United, or even the more experienced players. And I think you saw that you were in Bilbao last week, and you'll have heard the Luke Shaw comments and the Diogo Dalot comments apologising again for the performances and being very downbeat. And I think even Luke Shaw said that some of the players, you don't believe that some of the other players are up to it. Well, I think I'm sick of hearing Luke Shaw say that. I'm sure the fans are as well. That to me comes across as the defeatist mentality in the dressing room. Luke Shaw's been there for 11 years, and he's still saying things that he was saying 4 or 5 years ago. If I was Man United, I'd look at those players thinking, well, if that's what you think, you better leave, because they want a better mentality around the place. And if you're a young player, you're hearing your experienced players saying that some of these players aren't good enough, to find it hard to play for the club. That is the most defeative, negative attitude you can imagine. So that is a problem. You're a dressing room full of whingers.
Those interviews are difficult, though. I would just in Luke Shaw's defence, I think when they do have to front up after they lose, and when they're losing whatever it was, 17 league games, and they've obviously lost a major final, there's only sort of so many things you can say. I mean, I'd add to that list.
I don't think Luke Shaw has this status to say it, because Luke Shaw has barely played this season. So if that was Bruno Fernandes saying it, fair enough. But Luke Shaw's been sat on the touchlines for 9 months of the year because he's not been fit. So I don't think Luke Shaw has the credibility to say those things.
The other one I'd add into this list is Kobbie Mainoo. When you talk about players who might thrive when they go somewhere else, I'm just thinking about how good Mainoo was for England last summer, when he's obviously got Declan Rice, Jude Bellingham, Harry Kane, all these players around him. These sort of things. All right, we can talk about whether it was too structured and it was too conservative and everything else, and Gareth Southgate's approach and all that. But that was a well-drilled team with experience, and suddenly you're looking at Mainoo thinking he could really thrive in this. My concern would be, from a Manchester United point of view, that he would be the biggest fear to lose, that he could go somewhere and really become a really world-class player. I think Kobbie Mainoo's got that in it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if Mainoo goes, and there's every chance he will, because without boring people again, PSR, homegrown player, pure profit, there is a financial reason to let Kobbie Mainoo go. I think you're right. I think he's a player that they would regret letting go. But I think on the flip side is, I don't think he fits Amorim's system. I just don't think he is the profile of player that Amorim wants in the middle of his pitch. He's not mobile enough. He needs, you could drop him into the Arsenal team quite, if Thomas Partey was to leave this summer, for instance, we know Jorginho's going. I think a midfield of Mainoo, Rice and Odegaard is a potential title in the midfield. But he's surrounded by players that will be able to make up for his shortcomings. At Man United, he isn't. He's surrounded by Casemiro, who, great player in the past, but he's no longer a great player. Manuel Ugarte, who, again, not very mobile, not very good passer. Kobbie Mainoo is having to do the job of 2 or 3 players in that Man United team when he can't even do his own properly because of the way that Amorim sets it up. So I can see him leaving because, like I say, he doesn't fit the profile, and it's an easy way out of financial problems. But yeah, put him in that Arsenal team. Put him in a Liverpool team, I think he'd thrive, and that is the danger that United face with people like Kobbie Mainoo. I'm not sure that applies to Rasmus Højlund and Garnacho, but he could do, because they're obviously talented players, but I just think the environment they're in is not. They're being let down by the lack of experienced players around them, and I think as well, maybe by the lack of experience on Ruben Amorim's coaching staff. It's a very young coaching staff. I don't think they've got the wisdom either that could look at Kobbie Mainoo and think, how can we get the best out of this player without trying to force him into a system that doesn't suit him.
I mean, Garnacho's an interesting one from a Chelsea point of view, because obviously he was linked with Chelsea in January, and interested in what you heard about this, because I had some sort of conflicting information at the Chelsea end that I'm not sure how interested they actually were in January. I think that was quite agent driven at the time. Now, whether, of course, that changes in the summer because they decide to go for Garnacho over Sancho, for example, or whether they think actually we can do a cheaper deal now, or they've seen something in the last 4 or 5 months. I mean, I'm not sure. Given how Garnacho reacted to, Ruben Amorim him out of the Europa League final, and obviously how his brother reacted as well. I'm not sure that sends the greatest message to potential new clubs either, does it? That, you know, this guy actually, as promising as he is on the pitch, could actually be an issue off the pitch. I mean, do you think, from what you've heard, do you think Chelsea could be a viable option?
I think like you, I think it seems less likely. To me, I was told that Napoli was the deal that United thought was going to happen in January. That was 90% done, and at the last minute it didn't happen. I think it was more about personal terms than fee, and it didn't go to Napoli. I think you probably regret that now. Garnacho, I think United will as well, because he's barely contributed in the second half of the season. I think with Garnacho, people forget, although he's an Argentine international, he was basically born and raised in Madrid. He spent his life in Spain. I think he would embrace a move to La Liga. I think it would suit him financially, whether the clubs could do it or not. But I think he, again, is one of these players that would maybe a loan move to Germany or Spain would help him. But I think United probably need the money. And I just don't see him going to a Premier League club. I think, like you said, I think there's too many issues with Garnacho in the sense that, is he consistent enough? Is he intelligent enough when he's got the ball at his feet? I just don't think he would fit in. I think the only reason he'd go to Chelsea is because, as you know, they would find a way to monetize it down the line. And they've got a lot of wingers who are in the same kind of inconsistent boat.
Well, does he want a 14-year contract? That's the big question.
He probably does, yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting situation with Garnacho. But I think also United haven't helped themselves by it's become clear that Ruben Amorim told him at the weekend he can leave. Well, that just damages United's asking price. You know, all of a sudden everyone knows that he's available, and United maybe wanted, £50 million, and clubs know that they're desperate to get rid of him, and it might end up being £35-40 million to get. So more kind of naivety from the United end that this has been allowed to come out. But I think Garnacho will move on. I think that's pretty safe to assume, and he may go before the end of the June window.